Lauren, and welcome to this week's story time. Our story time today is going to be all about two of the things that I think are pretty popular when it comes to fall, things that you might think of during the fall season, and those are pumpkins and apples. So you think of pumpkins maybe to decorate for the fall, for Halloween. You can carve pumpkins to make jack-o'-lanterns. You can use them to make pie. Apples you can pick. You can also maybe use for decoration. Also put them in pies. So we are going to read some stories and play a couple games all about pumpkins and apples this week. So let's get started. Alright, so let's get started with our story time with our opening song, If You're Ready for a Story. So everybody go ahead and stand up for me. If you're ready for a story, take a seat. If you're ready for a story, take a seat. Clap your hands and stomp your feet. Make your hands all nice and neat. If you're ready for a story, take a seat. Good job, guys. Okay, so our first story this week for our pumpkins and apples story time is called Pick a Pumpkin, Mrs. Millie. Mrs. Millie, our teacher, is really silly. Good morning, class, she says. It's nice to see you. It's nice to see you too, Mrs. Millie, we say. Today we are going to the pumpkin patch, Mrs. Millie tells us. Don't be silly, Mrs. Millie. You mean the pumpkin patch. We'll pick pumpkins for our harvest party and bring them yak to school. No, we shout. You mean back to school. So you think they're going to bring them back to school on a yak? I don't think so. We line up to get on the bus. It's cold today, Mrs. Millie says. Don't forget your jackals. Don't you mean our jackets? We ask, giggling. At the farm, Farmer Don greets us at the gate. We'll go on a hayride, said Mrs. Millie. Everybody on the dragon. Don't be silly, Mrs. Millie. You mean the wagon. You think you see many dragons at a farm? I don't know. The hayride takes us down the road. Look, calls Mrs. Millie, a harecrow. We know what you mean. A scarecrow, we tell her. We climb off the wagon and run into the field. Be sure to pick a pig one, calls Mrs. Millie. Mrs. Millie, you mean a big one. You think they're going to pick the pig-looking pumpkin? I don't know. We wade through the muddy field. Look for round orange pumas, calls Mrs. Millie. Pumpkins, we shout. After everyone has found a pumpkin, we load them onto the wagon. Now we will visit the barn, says Mrs. Millie. You can be the animals. Don't be silly, Mrs. Millie. You mean see the animals. We feed the horses. We toss grain to the chickens. Mrs. Millie takes a picture of the pigs. Time to pet the boats, she says, smiling. Silly Mrs. Millie. You mean the goats. Mrs. Millie pets a billy. Let's help Farmer Don snake the leaves, says Mrs. Millie. You're so silly, we cry. You mean rake the leaves. We jump into the leaf pile. I spy a corn maze, says Mrs. Millie. Who wants to play hide and sheep? Hide and seek, Mrs. Millie, we yell. Ready for some hot apple spider? Asks Mrs. Millie. You mean apple cider, we say. How can you be so silly? Finally, it's time to leave. We'll take our pumpkins back to Mule, says Mrs. Millie. We know what you mean. Back to school, we shout. We can carve them into gecko-lanterns. Silly Mrs. Millie, you mean jack-o'-lanterns, we tell her. Wasn't the pumpkin patch fun, Mrs. Millie says as we line up for the bus. Yes, Mrs. Millie, we had fun, we shout. Farmer Den loads our pumpkins onto the bus. Thank you, we tell him. As the bus pulls away, we wave goodbye to Farmer Don and his Billy boats. And that's the end of Pick a Pumpkin, Mrs. Millie. All right, so the first game we're going to play this week is called 5 Little Pumpkins. So we've got 5 little pumpkins, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sitting on our gate. So what I'm going to do is take away a pumpkin, and then as the story goes, you guys are going to tell me how many pumpkins I have left, okay? So let's get started. 5 little pumpkins sitting on a gate. The first one says, oh my, it's getting late. So we take 1 pumpkin away. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Good job. The second one said, there are witches in the air. So that one goes away. We have how many? 1, 2, and 3. The third one said, but we don't care. Which leaves us with how many? 2. Good job. The fourth one said, let's run, let's run. And we've got how many? 1. The fifth one said, isn't Halloween fun? So we'll take him away, and we have how many left? Then, woo went the wind, and out went the lights, and 5 little pumpkins rolled out of sight. So all our pumpkins had rolled away from the gate. So we started with how many pumpkins? 5, right? And we took 5 away, which leaves us with 0 pumpkins. Good job, guys. All right, and it is time for a rocket song. So let's go ahead and put our hands together, make our rocket, and zoom, 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 we're going to the moon. Zoom, 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 we're going to the moon. If you'd like to take a trip, climb aboard my rocket ship. Zoom, 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 we're going to the moon. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off! Good job. Our next story is called Amelia Bedelia's First Apple Pie. Amelia Bedelia was visiting her grandparents. It was a glorious autumn afternoon, the perfect day to rake leaves into piles and run around the yard. Fall is in the air, said Granddad. Granddad and Amelia Bedelia looked up. So are the birds, said Amelia Bedelia. V, W, what are they trying to spell? Just then, Amelia Bedelia's grandma came outside. Quick, said Granddad, look busy. But it was too late. Hey, lazy bones, Grandma said jokingly. If you're just going to stand around, I've got a job for you. What do you need, Granddad asked. Apples, said Grandma. I made pie dough. If you'll get some apples, I can teach Amelia Bedelia how to bake an apple pie. Grandma's apple pie was Amelia Bedelia's favorite. Hooray, she yelled, racing to the car. She started to run but tripped over a branch and landed right in the pile of leaves. Whoosh! How was your trip? Asked Granddad as he helped her up. Fun, she said. Fall is in the air and on the ground, too. Granddad smiled and said, watch your step. Amelia Bedelia tried to watch her steps, but it made her dizzy to look down at her feet all the time. Amelia Bedelia and Granddad were already in the car when Grandma called out, be sure to pick up Granny Smith. Who is Granny Smith? Is she helping us make the pie? Amelia Bedelia asked. You bet, Granddad said. We couldn't do it without her. Amelia Bedelia and Granddad drove out into the country. Your supermarket is far away, said Amelia Bedelia. We aren't going to the supermarket, said Granddad. We'll get our apples at the farmer's market. What? Asked Amelia Bedelia. Do we need to buy a farmer? No, said Granddad, laughing. Their apples are much fresher. Apples are good for me, right? Asked Amelia Bedelia. Oh, yes, said Granddad. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. They're good for your teeth, too. Folks call them nature's toothbrush. Hey, Granddad, said Amelia Bedelia, if I eat an apple a day, I won't have to go to the doctor or dentist ever again. Granddad smiled. I wish it worked that way, Pumpkin, he said. Granddad picked up a bright green apple, polished it on his jacket, and tossed it to Amelia Bedelia. Nice catch, he said. Meet Granny Smith. Amelia Bedelia took a loud, crunchy bite. Granny is yummy, she said. Bushel baskets overflowed with red, yellow, orange, pink, and green apples. Some apples wore stripes or spots or splotches. The colors reminded Amelia Bedelia of autumn. While Granddad chose apples to buy, Amelia Bedelia read the names out loud. One kind was called Delicious, but they all looked tasty to her. So we've got Green Sleeves, Winter Banana, Black Twig, Blaze, Royal Gala, Duchess, Golden Nugget, Northern Lights, Pink Pearl, Granny Smith, and Delicious. Did you know there were that many kinds of different apples? When they got home, Grandma went right to work coring and peeling the apples. Amelia Bedelia measured the peels to see which one was the longest. Grandma cut each apple into 2 pieces, then into 4 pieces, and then into 8 pieces. Finally, she sprinkled sugar and cinnamon on the slices. Next, Grandma pulled out all her pie pans, hunting for just the right one. Amelia Bedelia found a tiny pan. Is this a toy? She asked. No, said Grandma, that is a real pie pan. It's just really small. Aha! Here is the one I want. Now please get me a little flour, Sugar Plum. Amelia Bedelia spied a small flower on the windowsill and she picked it. Here you go, Grandma, she said. Thanks, sweetie, said Grandma. Then she showed Amelia Bedelia where she kept the flour she used for baking. Grandma rolled out the dough. It got flatter and thinner. It got rounder and bigger. Grandma said, Careful, watch your fingers. Amelia Bedelia took her hands off the table. She watched her fingers very carefully. They looked pretty boring. She wondered why she had to do this to make an apple pie. Now we need a sprinkle of flour, said Grandma. Amelia Bedelia reached into the sack of flour, grabbed a handful, and sprinkled it all over their heads. Grandma laughed. Not on us, she said. On the dough. Amelia Bedelia sprinkled some on the dough, too. At last, said Grandma, we're ready to put this pie together. And that's exactly what Grandma and Amelia Bedelia did. Then Grandma popped the pie into the oven, set the timer, and started to clean up the kitchen. That's when Amelia Bedelia had an idea. She took the leftover dough and rolled out 2 small circles. She put one in the little pie pan, filled it with the extra apples, and plopped the circle on top. Then she crimped the edge all around. A smidgen of dough was left, so she made a little flower, a tiny daisy to decorate the top. Your mom and dad will be here soon, said Grandma. Then we'll have a pie party. Yippee, said Amelia Bedelia. Granddad heard the commotion and came into the kitchen. What are we celebrating, he asked. Honey, said Grandma, Amelia Bedelia made her first apple pie. After Grandma took her pie out of the oven, Amelia Bedelia carefully and secretly slid hers in. I'm going to set this outside to cool, said Grandma. It was time to get ready for the party. Grandma hummed as she set the table. Soon Granddad was whistling the same tune. Outside the birds were chirping and tweeting and singing like mad. Listen, said Amelia Bedelia. It sounds like the birds are having a party too. My pie, exclaimed Grandma. They all ran outside. The pie was covered with birds. Scram, hollered Grandma. Shoo, shoo. Amelia Bedelia took off her shoe and handed it to Grandma, but it was too late. Our pie, said Amelia Bedelia. Gone, said Grandma. Just then, Amelia Bedelia's parents arrived. Amelia Bedelia Dad stared at the empty pie pan. Gee, he said, couldn't you wait for us? The birds ate our pie, said Amelia Bedelia. What birds? Asked her mom. I think they were swallows, said Granddad. They sure were, said Amelia Bedelia. They swallowed the whole thing. Well, sweetheart, said Amelia Bedelia's mother, let's imagine how good it would have tasted while we eat our ice cream. The whole family tried to enjoy the ice cream and not think about the pie, but it was impossible. We made the best pie, said Amelia Bedelia. It was a thing of beauty, said Grandma. It would have been delicious, said Granddad. It was a perfect pie, said Amelia Bedelia. Her lower lip trembled. She let out a sob. You know, said Amelia Bedelia's father, just hearing you talk about that pie makes me think I can smell a fresh baked pie coming out of the oven. My pie! Exclaimed Amelia Bedelia. They raced to the kitchen. Grandma took the tiny pie out of the oven and set it on the table. There it was, bubbling hot and baked to perfection. They all gathered around and gazed at it as though it were a brand new baby. It's absolutely perfect, said Amelia Bedelia's mother. Just like Grandma's, said Granddad. Only smaller, said Amelia Bedelia. And you made it all yourself, said Grandma. This time, said Amelia Bedelia's father, let the pie cool down in the house. But no one could wait. Grandma cut tiny pieces for everyone. She took one bite and declared, "This is the best apple pie I have ever tasted." Amelia Bedelia's smile was so big that it was hard for her to eat. "Thank you, Grandma," she said, "and thank you, Granny." "Granny who?" said Amelia Bedelia's mother. "Granny Smith," said Amelia Bedelia. "She made all our apples in the first place." And that's the end of Amelia Bedelia's first apple pie. Okay, so our next game is called 5 Little Apples, and it's similar to the last game we played with our pumpkins, in that we are going to take away an apple as we go through our story, and then I'm going to have you guys count and tell me how many apples we have left as we go through the story, okay? And I've also put our story up on the board here so you guys can play along and see the words, all right? So let's get started. 5 red apples hanging in a tree, the juiciest apples you ever did see. The wind came by and gave an angry frown, and one little apple came tumbling down. Okay, so how many apples do we have left? Got 1, 2, 3, 4. Good job. 4 red apples hanging in a tree, the juiciest apples you ever did see. The wind came by and gave an angry frown, and one little apple came tumbling down. Now we've got 1, 2, 3. 3 red apples hanging in a tree, the juiciest apples you ever did see. The wind came by and gave an angry frown, and one little apple came tumbling down. And how many do we have left? 1 and 2. Good job, guys. 2 red apples hanging in a tree, the juiciest apples you ever did see. The wind came by and gave an angry frown, and one little apple came tumbling down. How many do we have left? 1 lonely apple left. 1 red apple hanging in a tree, the juiciest apple you ever did see. The wind came by and gave an angry frown, and one little apple came tumbling down. And how many apples do we have left in our tree? None! All the apples that have fallen out of our tree. How many apples did we start with? We started with 5, right? Good job. And we took 5 apples away, which leaves us with 0 apples left. Good job, guys. All right, everyone, and it is time for our banana song. So, put your hands together above your head, make your banana, and peel bananas. Peel, peel bananas. Peel bananas. Peel, peel bananas. And chop bananas. Chop, chop bananas. Chop bananas. Chop, chop bananas. And mash bananas. Mash, mash bananas. Mash bananas. Mash, mash bananas. And eat bananas. Eat bananas. Eat bananas. Eat bananas. And what's the last thing you're going to do? Go bananas! Good job. All right, our last story today is called The Pumpkin Fair. I'm going to the pumpkin fair. Pumpkins, pumpkins everywhere. These ones here were grown from seed. Yes, sir, yes, indeed. The biggest pumpkin ever seen. The smallest one there's ever been. Mine's in between, hand-grown by me. I got the pumpkin seed for free. It has a lot of shiny dots. I call them pumpkin beauty spots. The boy next door thinks he's so smart. He says each one's a pumpkin wart. I cover up my pumpkin's ears. She'll feel so awful if she hears. Mr. Pumpkin shakes my hand, and there's the Peter Pumpkin Band. The pumpkin princess has a crown of little pumpkins all glued down. Pumpkin bowling, roll a few. Pumpkin dear, I won't roll you. Toss the pumpkin through the net. Oops, a pumpkin omelet. Tug-o-war, just hold on tight. Tug and tug with all your might. Slipping, slipping, sliding, splash. We're in a bed of pumpkin mash. Juggle pumpkins, 1, 2, 3. If you touch mine, you're history. I like spitting pumpkin seeds. They're smooth and white like little beads. Pucker up and let 'em fly. Spit 'em far and spit 'em high. Pumpkin creatures in a row. How are you? Hello, hello. Mouse and pig and kitty cat. Rabbit, snake, and vampire bat. There's pumpkin cake and pumpkin pie. Eat until you think you'll die. Pumpkin ice cream cookies too. There's even gooey party stew. I'll try them all except the stew. It's icky looking, gross, P.U. It's time for prizes, time for fame. I know they'll never call my name. My pumpkin isn't very big. She's not a mouse or dog or pig. I tell her that it's still okay. She's very special in her own way. And then, how can it be? The pumpkin master's calling me. The best loved pumpkin at the fair, the best loved pumpkin anywhere. I get a ribbon red and blue, my pumpkin gets a ribbon too. How did they know? How did they see the way I felt inside of me? It's growing dark, but through the night, the jack-o'-lantern shines so bright. We all hold hands and sing a song of pumpkins round and pumpkins long, of pumpkins fat and pumpkins lean, and pumpkins somewhere in between. Good night, sleep tight, take care. See you at next year's pumpkin fair. And that's the end of the pumpkin fair. All right, so our story time is officially done for this week. So let's go ahead and do our goodbye song, Tickle the Clouds. Tickle the clouds, tickle your toes, turn around and tickle your nose. Reach down low, reach up high. Story time's over, so wave goodbye. Thank you guys for tuning in for our story time this week, and check back next week for an all new story time. Have a good week, guys.